Pattern. As soon as March started, all the ingredients were there to give us these coastal storms.
Yeah, there's a reason why they say in like a lion, right?
Yes.
I've also heard don't trust March. That was my other favorite in the Northeast. But we have indeed had back-to-back-to-back systems, and we have a potential for a fourth here in 2 weeks. Exceptional pattern that's in the Northeast right now. We're stuck in this big trough that's over the East Coast. It's not really moving, and so we're seeing these disturbances develop off the coast. That's the GFS. Here's the Euro. There's some differences, some pretty big ones between the solutions, but right now, they're all keying in on the mid-Atlantic for some big snow in areas off to Pennsylvania. But we've still got about 5 days before this system really holds together, and a lot can change. There's some very complex details about how these upper-level features are phasing, and that could mean big differences over the coming days.
So beware the Ides of March for the forecasters as well,
Yeah.
because this is a very difficult forecast yet again.
The I-80 and I-90 corridors. Here's a look at the alerts that are up for the northern plains. We are expecting to see snow here across the eastern part of Wyoming, across South Dakota, and into the northern part of Nebraska as well. We could be seeing as much as 8 to 12 inches of snow in some areas, so don't let your guard down with this system as we look ahead towards the weekend. So we're going to be seeing that low come out of the Rockies, and it's going to be weakening as it crosses the country, but not before we see that heavy snowfall break out across South Dakota. In between Rapid City and Sioux Falls, across I-90, that's where we could be seeing some heavy snow, as well as a little bit farther south towards North Platte, getting down into the I-80 corridor. Notice here off to the east, we also have some potential for ice in places like Des Moines, Iowa, off towards Chicago, and not pictured here, also Cincinnati into that ice threat as well. So winter not done yet. Spring is only a couple of days away, but we're still having these lingering effects here as we look ahead for this system. So temperatures very cold in these areas, cold enough to support some snow. So taking a look at these totals, we are expecting to see a narrow corridor of some heavy snow, 5 to 8 inches here from Rapid City off towards Sioux Falls. But notice this pocket as that low moves into the region. This is where we could be seeing potentially 8 to 12 inches, up to a foot in some of these areas. A little bit of snow here to come for the eastern part of Wyoming as well, and down to the south, not as much snow, but it's areas off to the east that we're also watching for that ice potential. But here, Montana's just been getting so much snow this winter. We've had nearly double the average in many of these areas, and we're looking to add to those totals today. But let's say icy mix, maybe even some sleet is in your forecast for Chicago tomorrow night. So what do you say we take a look at the upper levels of the atmosphere? We can get an idea of the profile of temperature that we're expecting as we look ahead towards tomorrow night. So I mentioned temperatures cold enough to support snow. That means that we have cold air below freezing all the way up towards the upper levels of the atmosphere. If we can hit that freezing mark at each level, that means that any precipitation that falls here is going to fall as snow. But down at the surface in Chicago, we're not expecting to see those below freezing temperatures. Today, we're sitting around 40 degrees, and that's going to stay the case as we look ahead towards tomorrow. So there, all that snow that falls melts into rain before we reach the surface. But as that low pressure system moves in, we start to see that warm air surging off to the north, up about 5,000 feet, just a couple thousand feet above the atmosphere. We're going to see a lot of warm air move in. And then overnight, as those temperatures drop to right around the freezing mark, that's where we could be seeing that threat for freezing rain come in. Is because we go from snow to then melting into rain to then a flash freeze down near the surface, where that temperature encounters colder surfaces like bridges and overpasses, places that are elevated, maybe some guardrails that are up against. That's the prime areas where we could be seeing some ice accumulation if we get this set up to look exactly right. So this is something to watch out for in Chicago. That we're right around the freezing mark, about 33 degrees. So Mark,
To be determined, but one thing is for sure, people are ready to kind of trade in the car scrapers, the snow shovels for shorts and bathing suits. People are just waving the white flag. Let's face it, we had 3 in a row.
yeah. Can you blame them?
No,
Snowstorm
I don't blame
on-
them at all.
Right.
I'm done. I'm not even living there.
And it is true. It has been relentless this March in portions of the Northeast. March 2nd, we had a snowstorm. March 7th, we had a snowstorm. March 13th, we had another one. And now, looking ahead towards next week, we could be getting a 4th in a 2-week period. I mean, that's just a lot of snow. So hopefully people like it, but I think we might be too much.
A friend of the show online, Monica, wrote in that she said she should start like a house trade from the desert Southwest into the Northeast corridor, so people there can experience snow and people in the snow can kind of thaw out.
Might not be a bad idea.
Genius.
Right? If you can pull that together pretty quickly, because we've got a system moving in that does bring that potential for more snow across portions of the Northeast. Very potent, lots of energy associated with it. Those are the colors that we're watching, and we're going to be seeing some coastal development. These coastal storms are very key for the big snowfalls that we see in the Northeast. So watch what happens as that low slides across the south into the mid-Atlantic, and then we see that energy potentially transfer out towards the ocean, and another low there develops. As that happens, we get that snow on the back end of that system, and it crosses up the mid-Atlantic into the Northeast. So here in the GFS model, at least, looks like the coastal areas could be in for another round of snow.
Current run of the GFS, a strong, well-organized, perfectly positioned low for nor'easter snow in the Northeast again.
Yes, so it's a very exceptional pattern that we're seeing. Lots of disturbances move in, cold air that's been sticking around, that trough that's been persistent. And if you look at the European model, the situation is similar, although not exactly the same. The European is not as keen on a lot of those big snows coming up the corridor. It keeps it more towards the mid-Atlantic, but heavy snow to come in portions of the Appalachians, maybe even some snowflakes in the D.C. area.
Hey, and that would be a big change from what we've seen for the rest of the season for sure. Dr. Navarro, thanks so much, and we want you to set up. It's really been a feast or famine setup here for cities of the Northeast corridor. Albany, the feast. But not everyone's so lucky. Dr. Erika Navarro here to talk about these storms. Again, looking at some of these stats for Albany, unbelievable.
Yeah, when you have things like 54% of your snow coming in March,
yeah.
you know, that's exceptional. That's
right.
March is not the time we typically get the big snow in this area. And if you look at our last 3 systems, double-digit snowfall totals each time as you look at these numbers. And Mark, this has been a record-breaking season almost in Albany. It's the snowiest winter they've had in over 100 years.
Yeah, and so we've
had 74.9 inches here to date, but if you look at D.C.,
yeah, not so much.
Not so much.
Yeah, both of these cities are on here because the people there are infamous at just berating the forecast because they claim they are in snow holes.
Yes, these areas, their locals know that sometimes they get robbed from the big snow totals that come in, while other places just bask in the glory of those.
Seems like everyone around D.C. will get snow. Just up the road, Baltimore to Philly. Plenty.
Yes.
D.C., nothing. Albany will say the same thing.
Yep. There's a reason for that. It has to do with the mountains that are in and around these cities. When we get these low-pressure systems that come off the coast and bring those northwest and very cold north winds into these areas, these winds interact with the mountains that are just to the west of places like D.C. So here's the Appalachian Mountains that come across West Virginia and into the Virginia area. When those cold winds come in over the mountains, they ride up those slopes and then they descend down the other side. Those winds actually warm and dry out as that air compresses, and that often can bust a forecast in the D.C. area because they don't have enough moisture.
You also have the influence of the Potomac River right there, the bay right there, so maybe just a little bit too much warm air gets in.
Yes.
Even though there would have otherwise been snow.
Right, so there's a double whammy here in the D.C. area. There's a reason why you don't see those big totals, and unfortunately, these factors may still come to play in the future events. Albany is similar. They're also a big snow hole into the areas of upstate New York. You would think a place like this would get a lot of big snow, but they've got mountains basically on each side of the city. So here, they get the downsloping winds pretty much from every area. So unfortunately, Albany, you sometimes also miss out on the big snow.
But what happened this year? Because Albany's been doing fine.
Yes, there is a very unique mesoscale event that often comes into play called a convergence zone. We see this a lot in the Northwest with big rains, but here we actually had it in the Hudson. It's called Mohawk-Hudson convergence, when the winds here actually come together right over the Albany area. And this convergence causes rising air, clouds to break out, and in this case, because temperatures were cold enough, very heavy snow.
So those mesoscale bands that happen inside storms can totally overdo the effects of the mountains.
Yes.
But the setup has to be perfect. Otherwise, everyone's saying we're in the snow hole again.
Right. So again, the locals know it. It can sometimes mean like the worst, you know, when it comes to a wintertime. But now we look at the forecast for that next nor'easter, and both of these areas could be in play for some heavy snow.
So you look at the U.S. GFS solution, big time snow in that stripe along 95, and at least for now, including D.C. in the mix.
Yes, but if you compare that to the European, very different solution. Not as heavy on the snow to the northeast, but look at D.C. Maybe even heavier snow in this model, if you believe it. But I still think models are coming together on the exact details of this, so take this with a grain of salt.
Yeah, the ingredients for this storm are still off the west coast.
Yes.
And so notorious for changing the models when there's not even any observations being done yet.
Yes, absolutely. So difficult forecast for sure. Details hopefully coming together, but prepare for snow in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic.
And that potential for a fourth nor'easter, fine balance across the west. Dr. Erika Navarro is here, and it is a stormy pattern, and thus the threat of more mudslides is there again.
Yeah, we do have that potential to see a lot more storminess in the west with this pattern that's moved in, because this is a very big, very broad low pressure, an upper level feature here coming into the west coast, which is going to bring rounds of snow to the mountains and, of course, rain there to the low-lying areas. Several disturbances are going to be riding around the base of that trough. We've talked about the impacts of those farther east, but if you look across the west, look at this snow that's coming for a lot of these areas, upwards of 3 feet for some portions of the central Sierra, 8 to 12 in many of these areas across other portions of the west. But notice the green. That's a lot of rain.
I think the snow is the good part of the story, right? You lock up that moisture. You can rely on it during the warmer months and drier months ahead. The rain might be the bad part of the story because it's right now, and it could be too much of a good thing.
Right, and you're thinking, oh, spring right around the corner, but spring usually means rain, especially if you live on the west coast, and in particular the northwest. There's that low pressure sneaking in, so we see those showers coming out all the way from northern California down past San Francisco, even LA and San Diego maybe going to be seeing some showers. You can see also the spotty snow showers moving in across the areas, and heavy rain as well off the coast of Portland and Seattle. So this is what you can expect, at least an inch or two ending Saturday. So not that very exceptional heavy rain. That's a good thing, but it is going to be a wet weekend for many here.
And if it lands in the wrong spot, it could still be enough to cause some more mudslides.